1865. The war between the North and the South was drawing to a bloody and brutal close. Union forces were pummeling Fort Anderson, a Confederate port on the Cape Fear River in coastal North Carolina. The Confederate troops were overwhelmed by superior forces and began retreating. As they abandoned Fort Anderson, a Confederate flag fell off a supply wagon. No one could imagine then that this very flag would alter the course of American history. It was found by a Union soldier of the 140th Indiana Volunteer Infantry and turned over to his commander, Colonel Thomas J. Brady. It was taken to Washington, D.C., where Brady had planned to present it to Oliver Morton, the governor of Indiana, on the steps of the National Hotel. In a twist of fate, John Wilkes Booth was also staying at the National Hotel. For over a year, Booth had been finalizing plans to kidnap Lincoln, spirit him to Richmond, and use him as ransom in a trade for captured Confederate soldiers. Booth was an actor who performed on occasion at the Ford Theater. He picked up his mail there as well, and on the morning of March 17, 1865, he ran into theater owner John Ford. It was then Booth learned Lincoln would be appearing that afternoon at the Campbell General Hospital to visit wounded soldiers. Seemed to be the perfect opportunity for Booth and his group to kidnap the president. The plan would be to subdue the driver of Lincoln's carriage, have co-conspirator John Surratt take control, and race for the city limits. Once outside Washington, D.C., the carriage would be abandoned, and everyone would continue on to Richmond. Lincoln, however, bypassed the hospital visit and instead went to the downtown presentation of the Confederate flag to Governor Morton. Booth arrived at the National Hotel to find Lincoln giving a speech to the assembled crowd. For the first time, Lincoln publicly expressed his support for black suffrage. Booth, a white supremacist and Confederate activist, was so incensed by the speech that he vowed that is the last speech he will make. His plans for kidnapping Lincoln then became plans for assassination. On April 9, 1865, the Civil War officially ended when Confederate Army General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union Army General Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. 5 days later, lifted by the news of the war being over, President Lincoln and the First Lady took a carriage ride to the Washington Navy Yard and visited with officers and sailors aboard the USS Montauk. Then they planned to attend Ford's Theater for an evening of the British play Our American Cousin. In a booth specially decorated for President Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth pulled out a Derringer and shot him in the back of the head. There was yet another twist of fate in store for the Fort Anderson flag. In 1865, it was taken to the Indiana State Museum and remained there for nearly a century. In 1965, it was released to a private collector. In 1995, Civil War historian and author Chris Fonville came across the flag at a relic show in Richmond, Virginia. Said he, it was the authentic Fort Anderson flag. I had randomly come across the historical grail that would become the centerpiece of our museum. Fonville, a professor at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, said the asking price at the time was $15,000. Purchase money was not available, so the flag went into the hands of another buyer. However, in 2004, the Fort Anderson flag came back on the market, placed on sale by a collector through the Horse Soldier, a Civil War-themed antique shop in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Even though the price had gone up to $40,000, it wasn't about to slip away this time. A group called the Friends of Brunswick Town came together and set about to raise the purchase money. From businesses to school children, civic groups to individuals, the donations came in. Through an agreement with the seller, the Friends had till midsummer to raise the funds. On June 27, 2005, the Friends of Brunswick Town had raised the funds, purchased the flag, and turned it over to the North Carolina Historic Sites to be placed in the Fort Anderson Brunswick Town Museum in Winnable. Jim McKee, site manager, stands next to the 6 by 12-foot flag that went on display September 16, 2005. After a journey of 140 years, the Fort Anderson flag, the flag that killed Lincoln, was back where it all began.